On January 21, 1924, following a fourth stroke, Vladimir Lenin passed away at his country estate in Gorky, just outside Moscow. Summoned to the estate, pathologist Professor Alexei Abrikosov performed the autopsy and temporarily embalmed the body for a public viewing that would last several days. Following this farewell, the founder of the Soviet state was to be buried in Red Square. A government commission was established to organize the funeral, led by Felix Dzerzhinsky, the ruthless head of the Soviet secret police. On the morning of January 23rd, Lenin's body, dressed in an uncharacteristic semi-military tunic, was placed in a red coffin. It was carried by hand out of the great house and borne through a bitter cold of -35 degrees Celsius, roughly 31 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, to Gerasimovo Station, about 2.5 miles from Gorky. The coffin was placed in a special mourning train bound for Moscow's Paveletsky Station. From there, it was carried by hand once again to the Hall of Columns at the House of the Unions in central Moscow. Massive crowds surged toward the center of the capital. An endless stream of people filed past Lenin's coffin from January 23rd to 26th. Party comrades, workers, peasants, and foreign delegations, roughly 500,000 people in total, came to bid farewell to the Soviet leader. Telegrams began pouring into the highest government offices, pleading to allow delegations from across the Soviet Union a chance to pay their respects. On January 25th, the government made a decision to construct a crypt for Lenin's coffin by the Kremlin wall and open it to the public. Following a design by architect Alexei Shchusev, a wooden crypt consisting of 3 cubic chambers was hastily erected in Red Square. By January 27th, the crypt was finished. Inside, a hammer and sickle sewn from black cloth was affixed to the ceiling. Lenin's coffin was carried out of the Hall of Columns, and the funeral procession made its way to Red Square. A pedestal had already been prepared there to receive the coffin. A farewell artillery salute rang out over the packed square. The cold outside was biting. Every 10 minutes, the honor guard beside the coffin was relieved. Finally, Stalin, Molotov, Kalinin, and Dzerzhinsky carried Lenin's coffin into the crypt. According to official Soviet historiography, the decision to preserve Lenin's body was made after a vast number of letters pleaded to leave the leader's body incorruptible, to preserve it for centuries, and to make it a symbol of the new communist era. However, this is simply not true. Soviet surgeon and academician Yuri Lopuhin, in his book The Illness, Death, and Embalming of Lenin, asserts that the archives do not contain a single letter requesting the embalming and long-term preservation of Lenin's body. Letters and telegrams did indeed arrive, but they pertained mainly to memorializing Lenin in other ways. The idea of preserving the body of the leader of the global proletariat was first voiced by Stalin at the official funeral on January 27, 1924. Opposing the sarcophagus were Lenin's wife, Nadezhda Krupskaya, Leon Trotsky, and a number of old Bolsheviks who had long been associated with Lenin. Supporting the idea were senior party leaders Grigory Zinoviev and Nikolai Bukharin. There was no consensus within the party leadership. However, everyone clearly understood the political benefits of keeping Lenin's body in a mausoleum as a symbol of the international communist movement. The first concrete proposal for the long-term preservation of Lenin's body was made on January 28th by Leonid Krasin, the Soviet Minister of Foreign Trade and an engineer by training. He put forward the idea of freezing the leader's body. Krasin invited dermatologist Professor Savelyev to a special meeting. Savelyev was a pioneer in cryotherapy who, as early as 1909, had proposed using carbonic snow, known today as dry ice, to treat skin diseases. Savelyev proposed preserving the body in a nitrogen atmosphere combined with extreme cooling. The proposal was accepted, and Professor Abrikosov and anatomist Professor Alexander Deshin were tasked with conducting freezing experiments on cadavers. On February 4th, an executive troika, a 3-man committee, consisting of Molotov, Bonch-Bruyevich, and Krasin, was created to decide the ultimate fate of Lenin's body. On February 7th, this troika, chaired by Molotov, gave Krasin official authorization to purchase the necessary equipment from Germany and begin developing the design and constructing the freezing apparatus. Abrikosov and Deshin completed their freezing experiments on 2 cadavers and reported excellent results. By February 21st, all preparatory work for freezing Lenin's body was complete. However, a subsequent meeting changed these plans entirely. Krasin wanted to discuss the very concept of deep freezing with medical experts or chemists. He reached out to biochemist Boris Zabarsky, whom he knew well. Zabarsky criticized the freezing idea, explaining that the process of decomposition would continue even at low temperatures. This conversation pushed Zabarsky toward the idea of chemical embalming. Being far removed from this specific field, he turned to a renowned specialist, Kharkov anatomist Professor Vladimir Vorobyov. In Vorobyov's department, sitting right in a room without any temperature control, were perfectly preserved mummies. Initially, Vorobyov categorically refused to participate in the project. It was not that he disagreed with Bolshevik ideology. Vorobyov's caution stemmed from the Civil War period. In 1919, when Kharkov was under the control of the anti-Bolshevik White Army, commanded by General Denikin, Vorobyov served as a medical expert, investigating the executions of White Army officers by Red Army units. The forensic document detailing the brutal executions bore Vorobyov's signature. Therefore, he feared that if the embalming of Lenin's body failed, his past transgressions would be used against him. Nevertheless, in early March, Vorobyov arrived in Moscow to meet Zabarsky. Thus, a tandem of 2 completely different men was formed, perfectly complementing each other. One was a magnificent master of embalming, and the other was a brilliant organizer, perfectly navigating the Soviet Party hierarchy of the 1920s. In March, the bitter February frosts weakened, and spring arrived in Moscow. This posed a direct threat to the preservation of Lenin's body. Work had already begun on Krasin's refrigeration unit. Zabarsky faced a major task: to discredit Krasin's idea using the voice of the authoritative Professor Vorobyov. In the first half of March, several meetings involving medical scientists were held to determine exactly how to preserve the body. Participating in these meetings, Vorobyov spoke out against freezing, as it threatened to rupture the tissues, and proposed his own detailed plan for chemical embalming. However, Vorobyov failed to gain support. The matter hung in limbo. It must be noted that even though work on Krasin's project was in full swing, Dzerzhinsky's government commission had not yet made a final decision on whether to preserve or bury Lenin's body. Zabarsky decided to go all in. On March 14th, he met personally with Dzerzhinsky and managed to convince him that he and Vorobyov could save the body. By March 21st, Dzerzhinsky, acting on behalf of the highest leadership, sent Vorobyov a letter.
The Commission proposes that you, Vladimir Vorobyov, take the necessary measures for the longest possible preservation of the body in its current state. The Commission grants you the right to choose your staff and to apply any measures you deem necessary.
On March 26th, the Commission of Experts descended into the mourning hall of the crypt and began a meticulous examination of the remains. The changes recorded by the Commission had reached a critical point. The hands and face were particularly damaged. The tissue damage had occurred due to an insufficient content of glycerin in the embalming fluid initially applied by Abrikosov. Other changes were the result of freezing and frostbite during the body's transportation, followed by partial thawing in the Hall of Columns and the spring temperature fluctuations while the body remained in the crypt. Had it not been for Zabarsky's desperate persistence, Lenin's body would undoubtedly have been buried soon. Krasin was clearly falling behind in assembling the freezing apparatus. Furthermore, Dzerzhinsky's government commission had already resigned itself to the impending inevitability of committing the body to the earth. In late March, the embalming of Lenin's remains officially began. Vorobyov, although unsure of success, had by this time developed a well-thought-out plan consisting of 3 main steps. First, to thoroughly saturate the entire body with formalin. Second, to bleach the brown spots that severely marred the appearance of the face and hands. For this, they used a proven museum agent, hydrogen peroxide. It bleached anatomical specimens perfectly. Third, to completely saturate the entire body with aqueous solutions of glycerin and potassium acetate, allowing the tissues to be preserved in the open air. All organizational problems, which Zabarsky took upon himself, were resolved swiftly and efficiently with the help of Dzerzhinsky, who wielded immense power at the time. All necessary tools, instruments, and chemical reagents were delivered without delay. A special rubber tub was manufactured at the caoutchouc plant. Separately, large rubber gloves were made for the hands, and for the head, a closed cylinder with an opening on the side. Vorobyov, Zabarsky, and their assistants, anxious about the extreme fluctuations in air temperature, did not leave the crypt day or night. They ate dry rations and barely slept. Upon learning of this, Dzerzhinsky ordered tram tracks to be laid right up to the crypt and had a tram car equipped with all necessary living quarters placed there for their use. Throughout the embalming period, Vorobyov was most troubled by the problem of the dark spots on the face and hands. Another issue was the uneven saturation of the skin, which created a zebra effect, alternating dark and light spots, stripes, or dots on the face. As the body became saturated, these defects gradually disappeared. By the end of May, they had managed to almost completely eliminate the pigment spots on the exposed parts of the body. But in June, a new complication arose. Swelling began to appear on various parts of the face and hands, distorting the physical appearance. Zabarsky suggested applying compresses of pure alcohol, which proved highly effective. By June, the construction of a new wooden mausoleum, designed by architect Shusev, was completed. A sarcophagus designed by architect Konstantin Melnikov was also approved, shaped as a triangular prism with electric bulbs mounted on its truncated top edge. However, as it turned out later, the optical design of the sarcophagus was a disastrous failure. The leader's body reflected off the slanted glass panes like a mirror, and people walking past the sarcophagus saw not one, but 3 faces of Lenin simultaneously. On June 17th, at Dzerzhinsky's request, preparations began to present the body to the delegates of the 5th Congress of the Comintern, which was taking place in Moscow at the time. Lenin's body was dressed and placed in the coffin on a pedestal in such a way that visitors could walk around it and view his face and hands from 3 different sides. The lower half of his body was covered with a flag. On the evening of June 18th, a procession of Congress delegates made its way to the mausoleum. Lenin's relatives also entered the mourning hall. Krupskaya wept as she exited the mausoleum. Lenin's brother, Dmitry Ulyanov, shook hands with Vorobyov and Zabarsky, saying,
"I can say nothing. I am deeply moved. He lies just as I saw him immediately after his death, and perhaps even better."
The Congress delegates were equally moved. Vorobyov and Zabarsky had done the impossible. It was an absolute triumph. On July 24th, a government commission, including the Minister of Health, Nikolai Semashko, alongside Professors Rozanov and Savelyev, inspected Lenin's body. The commission did not hide its profound admiration for the results of the work. Vorobyov was granted the prestigious title of Honored Professor. Beyond the honors, they received significant financial rewards. Vorobyov was awarded 40,000 gold rubles, equivalent to roughly $20,000 at the time. In 1924, this was a staggering fortune, enough to purchase dozens of luxury automobiles or a vast private estate. Zabarsky received 30,000, while their assistants were given 10,000 each. On August 1st, 1924, Lenin's mausoleum was officially opened to the public. That same day, in the newspaper Kharkov Communist, Vorobyov published an article revealing the main secret behind the embalming.
Every cell must be saturated with glycerin and potassium acetate. Glycerin never dries out, and potassium acetate is exceptionally good at attracting moisture, so a cell saturated with these substances can neither decay nor dry out.